April 12, 2004. A date burned into the annals of paranormal investigation. Masafumi Kobayashi, Japan's most celebrated supernatural researcher, vanishes without a trace, leaving behind only a charred, hollowed-out shell of a home. Inside the wreckage, firefighters pull his wife Keiko from the ruins. But Kobayashi, he's nowhere to be found. Is he dead, or has he been consumed by the very darkness he spent his life documenting? The key lies in his final project, The Curse. It's a descent into madness that blurs the line between reality and nightmare, echoing the chilling, true-to-life terror of lost tapes. Forget cheap jump scares. This is a slow burn, psychological rot that buries itself under your skin, standing alongside icons like Ringu and Ju-on. This film is a masterclass in dread, so dim the lights, settle in, and let's look through Kobayashi's lens at the horrors that should have remained hidden. Since 1995, Kobayashi isn't just another tabloid hack chasing ghosts for clicks. He's a professional, a man whose integrity earns him the trust of those haunted by the impossible. But everything shifted on November 12, 2002. A woman named Ryoko Okui living in Kogen reaches out with a desperate plea. Something is wrong with her neighbor. For 2 months, a bone-chilling sound, the wailing of a child, has echoed from that house every single night, stripping the Okui family of their sanity and sleep. When the investigation team arrives, they are met with cold hostility from the neighbor Junko Ishii. Peering through the heavy-drawn curtains, Kobayashi and his cameraman Miyajima catch a fleeting glimpse of an 8-year-old boy, staring back with an unnerving, vacant intensity. The audio evidence is even more unsettling. When sound expert Professor Suzumi Kaneo strips away the static, the analysis turns grim. At first, it sounds like a feline screech, but deeper examination reveals a terrifying reality. It's the distorted, overlapping cries of at least 5 infants. Suspecting Ishii is hiding something monstrous, perhaps a kidnapping ring. The crew rushes back to the Okui residence to press for more answers, only to find the house abandoned. The trail has gone cold. And there's one more detail that makes the blood run cold. The backyard of Ishii's home is littered with the rotting carcasses of pigeons. Just days after the investigation begins, mother and daughter are dead, victims of a sudden brutal car accident. The hunt has begun, and the bodies are already starting to pile up. The supernatural seems to be a gold mine, and everyone from Sugishobo to the major networks is staking a claim. On August 3, 2003, the gold rush hit a fever pitch during a televised variety show. The premise is simple. Psychic phenom Koichi Hiratsu puts 10 gifted children to the test. They're tasked with clairvoyantly sketching images hidden inside sealed boxes. Most stumble, but young Kanayano is different. Instead of just replicating the circle, she captures its exact dimensions. Even the jagged creases in the paper. She passes the next 3 questions with eerie precision, but the final test is where it all goes wrong. Asked to write the Russian word for star, Kana doesn't write a thing. Instead, she draws a twisted, gnarled face. The producers, brushing it off as exhaustion, push her to the next impossible feat, creating water inside a sealed glass bottle. It's a physical paradox, a trick of the mind. Yet, as the cameras roll, Kana makes the impossible manifest. She fills the glass, and with it, few stray hairs. Professor Takai Kiyuhara, a geologist, analyzes the contents and finds something skin-crawling. The water is teeming with plankton, likely pulled from a stagnant stream in the hairs. They belong to a newborn, too undeveloped to even have a spinal cord. After the broadcast, Kana spiraled. High fevers, agonizing headaches. Her parents, Teruyuki and Kimiko, rushed her to every specialist, but the doctors found nothing. But when returning to speak with Ms. Kimiko on December 4th, 2003, the truth was revealed. Kana has been talking to empty corners of her room. When the reporter finally presses the girl for answers, she offers only 4 chilling words. It's too late now. That very evening, the mundane turns violent. The house erupts as the family sits for dinner. Dishes are hurled by invisible hands shattering against the walls. A metal spoon snaps clean in half, like a dry twig, right before Kobayashi's eyes.
The gravity of the situation is no longer a question, it's a reality.
The narrative fractures. Jumping to October 23rd during a live segment for Midoriyama TV's Night of True Stories. To spice up the ratings, they bring in the comedy duo Ungirls and the actress Marika Matsumoto, known in industry circles for her uncanny sixth sense. The crew treks deep into the mountains toward an ancient shrine, whispered to be a transit point for lost souls. As they push through the dense, suffocating woods, the atmosphere curdles. Marika starts trembling, her skin crawling as she hears voices whispering in the wind. Voices the comedians can't hear.
When Takushi reaches out to touch a skeletal dead tree,
Marika screams and tries to stop him. Then she hits the dirt, convulsing and shrieking in a language nobody recognizes. When the footage airs, the public cries, staged. To clear the air, the network hosts a live broadcast featuring Marika and Kobayashi. But the segment goes off the rails. The second, the psychic Mitsuo Hori steps onto the set. He locks eyes with Marika, lunges at her throat with feral intent, and bellows a warning that freezes the room. Beware the pigeons. It takes the entire production crew to drag him off her, and their hands tremble. The audience writes Hori off as a lunatic, a desperate man craving his 15 minutes. Chaos deepens on December 9th. A variety show host visits Hori's home, only to find a man lost to his own fractured reality. Hori is draped in layers of aluminum foil, his home plastered inside and out with frantic, illegible scrawls that he calls messages from the universe. He speaks of worms,
millions of them writhing beneath the surface of everything.
The truth behind the mountain shrine and why Hori attacked Marika begins to bleed into the light. The director of Night of True Stories makes a chilling discovery on the original unedited tapes from October 23rd. A pale, distorted figure is clearly visible behind the trees, locking its gaze onto the actress. Terrified of the potential fallout,
the director scrubs the figure from the broadcast.
But the damage is already done. Since that night, Marika has been drifting. She fills notebooks with the same frantic circular patterns she drew while convulsing in the woods, with no memory of drawing them at all. Then the floor falls out. December 22nd, 2003.
Almost 3 weeks after Kobayashi's last interview,
Kanayano vanishes. Was it a runaway act, or something more sinister? Her parents reveal that Hori had visited her just a week before she disappeared. Stranger still, Kana hadn't been afraid.
She had welcomed him like a confidant.
When the investigators search her room, they find the note Hori left behind. Amidst a sea of maddening, repetitive circles, a single, desperate plea is scrawled in Kana's hand. Help me. When Kobayashi confronts Hori, the man doesn't feign ignorance. He collapses into a heap of sobs, wailing that Kana is being devoured by the alien worms that he's been raving about. In a frantic, violent blur, Hori tears into Kobayashi's bag,
snatches the girl's note,
and begins scribbling furiously, muttering about a blue house. The map he sketches is a jumble of madness, offering no clear path forward.
Suddenly, Hori snaps his gaze upward
and mutters a single jagged word, Kagutaba. The name hangs in the air, a linguistic poison that neither Kobayashi nor his cameraman Miyajima recognize. But the universe reacts instantly. The camera's internal hardware suffers a catastrophic failure. The feed glitches, stuttering in a rhythmic, sickening pulse. If you pause the frame, if you dare to look closely at those fleeting, garbled seconds, you'll see things that defy physics, shadows that don't belong to this world. Days after the erratic encounter with Hori, the stakes sharpen.
On December 26th,
Marika calls,
her voice trembling.
She has something she needs to show him. Since that nightmare at the shrine, she's been sleepwalking, her fingers compulsively twisting string into complex, suffocating knots. It's not just the physical toll. She hears a rhythmic hollow tapping against her floorboards.
When she confronts her upstairs neighbor, Midori, the woman swears she hasn't made a sound.
Kobayashi installs a camera.
The footage is chilling.
Night after night, Marika rises in a trance, her movements fluid and mechanical, busy binding those knots. But the audio is worse. When the team filters the ambient noise, a guttural, dissonant whisper emerges, repeating a single name, Kagutaba.
Marika stares at the monitor,
turning pale. It's the same voice that possessed her at the shrine. But before Kobayashi can chase the shadow of Kagutaba, he finds the anchor. While navigating the city, he stumbles upon a housing complex that mirrors Hori's frantic sketches, and then tracks down the apartment, the second unit on the third floor. The occupant is a man named Osawa. Neighbors describe a descent into madness. The once friendly man now spends his days muttering to empty air, and most horrifically, luring pigeons into his apartment
to feed. He's a man hollowed out from within.
Kobayashi reaches out to linguists across the country, but Kagutaba remains a void until Dr. Shioya unearths a relic from a forgotten archive. The term traces back to Shimokage, a small village in Nagano province. It was raised decades ago to make way for the Shikami Dam. But its history is stained. Unlike the communities that worship benevolent deities,
Shimokage bowed to something darker.
They practiced rites for Kagutaba, a name that,
according to a 200-year-old manuscript,
carries a sickening weight, disaster, vessel, and spirit. The deeper the research goes,
the more the history of the Shimokage sect comes to light.
An Eastern sorcerer and a medium allegedly founded the cult, performing rituals to summon the entity. They eventually realized they had invited an apocalypse they couldn't contain, forcing them to trap the beast deep beneath the earth, sustaining it with blood sacrifices to pacify its boiling rage.
The dam project in 1978 didn't just drown the village. It disturbed the resting place of whatever was buried there.
Kobayashi stares at the map of Nagano. The path is set to understand why Kana vanished, why Marika is knitting her own sanity into knots, and what truly lurks behind that name.
He has to go to the site of the flood.
He has to go to the heart of the drowning.
Luck is finally on Kobayashi's side as he tracks down a seasoned historian, Tanemura,
who guards raw footage of the Shimokage rituals. The village was built by sorcerers to ward off malevolent spirits. Every household hung a sickle at their door and kept a dog,
the preferred sacrifice for the darkness they served.
The footage is hypnotic and deeply unsettling.
Kobayashi watches as Priest Ishii presides over a rite that mocks the traditions of the land.
In standard Shinto worship, one bows twice, claps twice, and bows once more. But in the Shimokage sect, Ishii bows once, claps 4 times, then bows once more. It is a blasphemous distortion, but the climax of the ritual is pure chaos. As the dancer costumed as the demon Kagutaba begins a
frenzied guttural dance,
she suddenly collapses into a violent seizure, the ceremony rupturing in a flurry of screams. Whether it was genuine possession or the wrath of a god disturbed by the encroaching dam, no one knows. What is known is that Priest Ishii died shortly after mailing that tape to Tanemura, and his daughter, who played the demon, has spent the years since living in the shadow of that failed rite.
That woman is Junko Ishii.
Kobayashi's heart sinks as the pieces click into place. He's tracking a bloodline, finds her in the relocation village of Mikaishi, a place where the old customs refuse to die. The sickles still hang and the dogs still howl in the night.
But Junko's home is the epicenter of the madness.
It is draped in an intricate, suffocating web of knotted cords, the exact same knots Marika has been twisting in her sleep. The walls are covered in a frantic constellation of small dots, identical to the cryptic scribbles on Kana's note. The history of the Ishii family
is a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight into the void.
Neighbors describe Junko as once being a vibrant, kind-hearted woman.
But everything changed the moment the ritual went cold. Following her father's desperate command,
she left for Tokyo, enrolling in the Musashino nursing school and eventually securing a position in the maternity ward at Hachioji.
January 27, 2004.
Kobayashi corners a former colleague of Junko Ishii. The revelations are stomach-turning. During Ishii's time in the maternity ward, she was the one tasked with disposing of aborted fetuses. But the hospital staff recalls a grim rumor. Ishii didn't just discard them, she took them.
The pieces finally start to lock into place with a sickening snap.
Those cries the Okui family heard, the infants' voices on the audio recording, they were something far worse. But just as the picture clears,
the floorboards of reality begin to give way. February 6th, 2004.
Marika bursts into Kobayashi's office, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror, trembling as she delivers the news.
Her upstairs neighbor Midori and 6 others have been found dead,
hanging in the local park.
The police report is a nightmare of anomalies. The 7 victims were complete strangers to one another, yet they were all bound by the same, impossibly complex, ritualistic knots.
Marika, shattered, fled her apartment, leaving everything behind. Kobayashi, sensing the walls closing in, decides to shelter her at his home while he drives deeper into the abyss. He needs to know why.
As he scans the list of the 7 victims,
his blood turns to ice. Among the dead are Midori and the 5 men he had previously suspected of abducting little Kana. But the final revelation is the most damning. Kobayashi digs into the history of Osawa. One of the dead men, neighbors describe his slow, rotting descent, a man who started out kind, only to warp into something hollow after a dispute with a neighbor over noise, and that neighbor, the woman who eventually moved out, leaving Osawa to spiral into the madness of eating pigeons and muttering to the air.
It was Junko Ishii.
Every path, every scream, every corpse, it all leads back to her.
The nightmare spirals out of control with 2 final, jarring jolts.
First, Kana's father, Teruyuki, snaps. In a cold, inexplicable haze, he stabs his wife Kimiko to death, then calmly dials the police. Then comes the day at the Kobayashi household. While Marika is preparing lunch with Keiko, she freezes, her voice distorts, twisting into an unnatural, guttural growl as a sudden, sickening thud echoes against the window. Outside the yard is littered
with the crumpled, broken bodies of pigeons,
a grim echo of Hori's frantic warning. And desperate, Kobayashi drives Marika to Hori's home, but the moment the footage of Junko Ishii flickers onto the screen, Hori collapses, his mind fracturing under the weight of what he sees. Marika makes the final call. They have to go to the dam, to the site of the ancient ritual. The lake is a mirror of stagnant, suffocating dread. As Marika rows them to the center,
Kobayashi guides her through the ritual he pulled from the forbidden archives. For a brief, blissful moment, the crushing weight on Marika's chest lifts.
Hori suddenly snaps, shrieking for them to flee toward the shore before vanishing into the tree line, wailing Kana's name like a madman.
Kobayashi can't just let him disappear.
He orders Miyajima to guard Marika and plunges into the dark, chasing the psychic's frantic cries. This is the moment everything unravels. The descent into true, unadulterated terror begins. The forest at twilight is a different world.
Through the jittering,
low-light lens of the camera, it reveals a massacre. The ground is paved with the rotting, eviscerated remains of dogs and pigeons.
Sacrifices offered to something that doesn't know how to stop consuming.
This explains why they didn't see a single dog when they arrived at the village earlier today. Kobayashi finds Hori slumped beneath a rotted, forgotten torii gate. The man is a shell, catatonic,
his fingers trembling as he points at the debris.
Kobayashi moves in, the camera's infrared light cutting through the gloom.
There,
nestled among the broken stones and the circles etched into the earth, the same maddening dots from Kana's drawings. She isn't alone.
Surrounding her,
in the filth and the shadows, are the aborted things, tiny weeping husks of life, writhing in the cold earth. Hori is gone, his body now a vessel for something ancient and hungry. Kobayashi's hands shake. He has to get the psychic out. He has to get away. Compared to Hori, Marika's condition is a different kind of nightmare. As soon as the sun dips below the horizon, her consciousness snaps. She begins emitting guttural growls that turn the air cold. The cameraman Miyajima has no choice but to kill the engine and check on her. But the moment his hand makes contact, She shoves him aside with unnatural strength and bolts into the dense tree line. He sprints after her, lungs burning, only to find her collapsed in a clearing, thrashing and screaming into the void. Then just as suddenly as the madness took her, she goes limp. While Hori and Marika are rushed to the hospital,
The Sugishobo reporters track down Junko Ishii's home.
breaking inside to find a living tomb. The stench is suffocating. Rotting garbage and dead pigeons litter every inch of the floor. Kobayashi inches toward the second floor, his heart hammering against his ribs, only to stumble upon a room suffocated by dozens of Kagutaba masks. In the corner lies Kana, huddled beside a young boy rumored to be Ishii's son. When the authorities finally storm the house, it's already too late for Kana. As for the boy,
Authorities confirm he isn't blood-related to Ishii,
leading the Kobayashi family to take him in. A month later, the dust begins to settle. The boy finally shows flickers of joy, and Marika is released, officially cleared of her medical trauma. But Hori isn't so lucky. Driven into a deep,
shattered
state of psychosis, he's locked away in a psychiatric ward.
isolated from the world. Just as March draws to a close,
Kobayashi receives a call from Professor Tanamura. He's unearthed
an ancient painting,
and it's a blueprint for a nightmare. It depicts villagers using monkeys and dogs as sacrifices for the demon Kagutaba, feeding these creatures to a vessel to manifest the beast. The pieces click into place with sickening clarity. Junko Ishii had chosen Kana as her vessel, forcing her to consume the collected fetuses.
to invite the demon in.
But with Ishii dead, the motive dies with her. Is the curse of Kagutaba buried with the architect, or is it still hunting? And why does the entity slaughter everyone it touches? The documentary ends not with closure, but with a lingering hollow dread, a string of questions that might never be answered. 2 days after the cursed tape is finalized, the Kobayashi residence erupts into a roaring inferno in the dead of night. Chaos reigns, and when the smoke clears,
The investigators find only the charred remains of Kobayashi's wife.
there is no sign of the journalist. 3 days later, the horror deepens. Hori, having escaped the psychiatric ward, is discovered stuffed into a disposal pipe, his life brutally extinguished. The case hits a wall, vanishing into the shadows.
Until May 19, 2004,
A month after the fire, a mysterious package arrives at the Sugishobo radio station containing a camera and a final,
haunting roll of film.
On the night of the fire, a delirious broken Hori bursts into the Kobayashi home. He's raving, claiming he can hear Kana's voice and that Kobayashi is being devoured by otherworldly parasites. Before they can make sense of his madness, the psychic lunges at the young boy, screaming that the Kagutaba demon is alive, that it's festering inside the child's body. The camera shakes violently, capturing the pure, unadulterated hysteria of the room.
Suddenly, Keiko begins to change. A guttural growl rips from her throat.
She's being consumed by something vile. Kobayashi
Pivots the lens, catching Hori frozen in place.
while for one split second, the boy's face contorts into the hideous, distorted visage of the Kagutaba demon. The screen erupts into a blur of motion as Hori drags the child away, and Keiko, hollowed out by the possession, douses the house in gasoline and strikes a match. To this day, Masafumi Kobayashi is a ghost. Whether he survived that inferno or perished in the flames remains a mystery that haunts the industry. Noroi the Curse stands as a masterclass in found footage horror, a jagged gem that refuses to offer the comfort of an explanation. The atmosphere is thick, suffocating with unanswered questions and an impending sense of dread that refuses to leave. What happened to Miyajima and Marika?
Does the Kagutaba demon still hunt them from the darkness? The film cuts to black,
Leaving you paralyzed in your seat, unable to shake the feeling that some doors, once opened,
should never have been touched.